Okay, this is the game Anatoly Karpov, 1981, in Amsterdam. This was the position the players reached after 22 moves from a Queen's Indian defense. And here it was black to play. Karpov was playing the black pieces. And Karpov found an incredible move. So if you want to try to find it yourself, pause the video now. All right. And the move Karpov found here was knight e5, an amazing move, apparently hanging his knight, but if the piece is taken, the very sneaky bishop c6 traps the white queen. So very nice. So white can't take the knight. White instead decides to push this pawn because this defends the c6 square and prevents bishop c6. And Karpov says, okay, but in pushing this pawn, you've undefended this pawn, the c5 pawn, so I'll just take that. So Karpov plays b takes c5, and now white wants to take this pawn, the a pawn with the queen, but if he did it immediately, black would simply capture this knight. So white retreats the knight, maybe with the idea that the knight is going to come to d3 eventually and challenge the black knight on e5. All right, so Karpov, instead of trying to defend this pawn, just says, you can have it. I'll defend my c5 pawn and strengthen my center. And he plays d6. White executes his plan and takes on a5. And now we see that white has kind of been put on the back foot here. This knight is on the first row. This queen, it's not really clear what the queen's going to be doing here long term. And Karpov has a clear advantage now. But how is he going to convert this advantage into a win? Well, he's winning on the queen side. With this, he controls the only open file. And he's also winning in the center. He has more central pawns. This knight is definitely better than this knight. And you would think, because he's winning on the queen side and in the center, that that's where he would play. But Karpov decides, actually, he wants to be winning on the king side too. And so what he does here is he retreats this, after he captures in the center, and then retreats this knight to g6. And he's going to attack this rook, because the problem on the king side is that this rook is blockading Karpov's pawns. He can't advance on the king side with this blockade, and so knight g6 is going to break this blockade. White has no choice but to retreat the rook, and now Karpov strikes immediately, h4. White cannot allow black to take here without ruining his pawn structure and giving away the h-file. So white decides he has to capture. Karpov recaptures now, threatening to take on g2 with check. White defends g2 with the king. Now Karpov plays a very calm, very cool move. Just retreats the knight and says, hey, now that you've put your king on f1, you have no real way of connecting these rooks. And that means I'm going to win the h-file. Whether white decides to trade here on h8, or he decides to move this rook to g1, either way, at the end of either variation, black will control the h-file. White ultimately decides to move his rook to g1. And now look at this. This is incredible. So Karpov put his opponent on the back foot with his little tactical shot with knight e5. And now only a few moves later, he's positionally dominating. So he's winning on the queen side. He's winning in the center. And now he's also winning on the king side. So this is positional domination. Karpov controls the whole board. White's getting smushed. All right, this is also a very nice move, rook g6, because it blocks the white queen from attacking the c7 pawn. And that means the black queen can now move. The black queen was tied down to defending the c7 pawn. Now that white is no longer attacking it, the black queen will be able to move. So white decides he's got to do something with his own queen. He backs it up to a4, maybe with the idea of coming back here to c2 and attacking this way. Karpov now brings this bishop, this little move, bishop b7, a very nice move. So two ideas for this move. One is this frees the h-rook to move wherever it wants along this file without having to worry about this bishop hanging on a8. The other idea is that it also potentially prepares to swing this rook along this row and attack the white queen and maybe potentially win this pawn. So white doesn't want any of that. He decides to retreat the queen on his own back to c2, and now he's attacking the f-pawn, threatening to win the f-pawn with check. Karpov says that's no problem. I will just defend the f-pawn with my queen, and I'll centralize my queen. Look at this powerful centralized queen. And pause here for a second and look at the positional domination. Look at white's pieces. White's army is essentially boxed in to this little camp at the back of his own territory. He has a couple pawns out here, but these are weak. In fact, this could be won immediately if Karpov wants to. This pawn is very weak, and most of his forces are stuck back here, trapped around, white's forces are trapped around his own king. Meanwhile, Karpov's army dominates. Karpov's army dominates the entire board. Amazing. Incredible positional sense from Karpov. All right, white continues. He's bringing his knight back into the game and attacking this queen. Karpov says, yeah, no problem. I'll just pin the knight against your queen. And now what do you do? Very hard for white to find moves now. Very tough position. White decides just to break the pin and attack this rook. This means that this knight is going to be... the idea is that this knight is going to be stuck to defend this rook, or this rook's going to have to move. Karpov again says it's no problem. Now, here's an interesting moment. I think most club players would take this pawn. This pawn is attacked twice. It's not defended. And Karpov could have taken this. But he doesn't want to. He doesn't need to. And one of the reasons he doesn't want to is it's actually very convenient having this pawn here to block the diagonal that black's king is on. Having this pawn here actually keeps Karpov's king safer. So he doesn't even necessarily want to win it, even though he could. And instead of winning this pawn, he decides, I'll just put my bishop here on a6. I'll give it a better diagonal, a very scary diagonal, the same diagonal as white's king. And he's just squeezing. He's choking white. He's slowly choking him to death. It's very hard for white to find a move here. In fact, white was so hard-pressed to find a move here that he did what a lot of players do when they don't know what else to do, and he just shuffled his king e1, just trying to hold on and not make his position worse. But, of course, this is not a great move. Karpov immediately jumps his rook in. This does two things. One, the obvious thing is it attacks the g2 pawn, which the king, now that the king has moved, the king is no longer defending this g2 pawn, so Karpov attacks it. And this also means that the queen is no longer attacking the rook, and that means this knight is going to be free to move. So a nice idea from Karpov. White has to do something about this pawn, and instead of just moving his king back, which would be kind of embarrassing, he decides he's going to push this pawn, and he's going to defend it by getting it out of the way. And he plays g3, but this is not good. This is not a good move. It creates these big light square holes, and now Karpov just needs to figure out how to get his knight into one of these spots, and he's just going to be absolutely dominant. Just brilliant positional play by Karpov here, just slowly building the pressure. And then this next move is also very instructive. Karpov trades this nice, scary bishop for white's knight, which is not the first move that I think most people would look at. But it does a couple things. One, it opens this e5 square up for the knight without the possibility of white trading it off. So if you play knight e5, immediately white will just trade. And by taking here, you make this square available for the foreseeable future. White decides to capture with the bishop, and Karpov drops the queen into this light square hole that was created with a big threat, which is checkmate. Queen takes f2 checkmate, and if it was black to move, it would be mate in 1. So black has to do something about that, and he decides to retreat his queen to c2, defending the mate and also creating this battery to attack the f-pawn. Karpov very calmly, not in a rush, just king f6, defends the pawn, and asks white, okay, what are you going to do? White decides he's got nothing better but to over-defend this pawn so he can move his queen around without worrying about getting mated. Karpov finally gets to bring his knight back to e5, and now this knight is just going to be absolutely dominant. White really can't afford, with these light square holes, White really can't afford to give up this light square bishop. So he decides to retreat the bishop and attack the queen. And this is a very instructive moment too, I think, because what Karpov does here, I don't think most club players or intermediate players would do. Karpov retreats the queen and offers the queen trade. I think most players would play queen g2 here because it looks very scary. It's creating this battery on the second rank. But Karpov understands that he's winning. He's completely positionally dominating. He doesn't need to keep the queens on the board. And in fact, if you look at White's pieces, the queen is White's best piece. Trading off this queen, giving White this huge clamp on the f3 square, doesn't benefit White. It trades off White's best piece and leaves him with these very cramped, very sad pieces. But it's very nice that Karpov notices and accepts this idea. I think it's kind of hard when you're the one attacking. It can be hard to offer the queen trade. White evaluates his position and realizes that the queen trade is not good for him and decides that he needs to move his queen. So he puts the queen here. It's a good idea. He's trying to pin this knight to prevent it from jumping into one of these squares. But Karpov very calmly and collectedly simply sidesteps with his king, breaks this pin, and asks White, yeah, but now what? And White looks and looks and looks and cannot find a good move, and that's because there aren't any good moves. Black is completely winning here, and that's why White couldn't find anything better than to resign. So, a beautiful game by Karpov. He started, he got his opponent on the back foot with a very nice tactic, knight e5, an unexpected tactic, and then the rest of the game just took over all three sides of the board, crushed the White army. And look at this. Look at the final position. Look at White's pieces. Stuck back here in this little camp with these black pieces that are just absolutely dominant everywhere. Completely crushing. A beautiful game by Anatoly Karpov, one of the greatest positional players of all time. You have to admire Karpov's play. Thank you for watching, and until next time.